Ladies and gentlemen, good evening, and welcome to episode 1 of Murph and Sully's Youth Athletics Podcast. I'm your host, Ed Sullivan, also known as Sully, and I'm joined by
Dan Murphy, also known as Murph. Well, forget that.
number 1. Number 2 or number 1? So we're glad to have you all here. Just a little bit about ourselves. I am a mathematics teacher in the middle school, along with being an athletic director and a coach. Murph, how about you tell everyone what you do in your everyday life?
All right. I am a financial planner and consider that partially a coach as well, of course. And in my spare time, besides raising my family, I am coaching a lot.
Coaching a lot. That's right. So Murph and I, coach and work for the same institution. We're not going to bring that institution's name up, but people that know us will know that our experiences come from there. But we want to try to keep anonymity and keep this thing professional, which for Murph is going to be very hard.
That's right.
So on this podcast, it's meant to talk about youth athletics from the student athlete perspective, the coach's perspective, the parents' perspective, the administrator's perspective, occasionally the official's perspective. We're going to have shows that are very funny, and we're going to have shows that are serious. And Murph, today's topic is kind of serious.
That's right.
Murph, how about you tell the people what we're talking about today?
Well, when we were batting around some subjects to talk about, we kind of kept coming back to the fact that the reason that we decided to do this was basically because we're sportsless right now. And that is obviously due to the coronavirus and all the stuff that's occurred because of it. And I think I mentioned to Sully that this is, it's weird, obviously. You're like, varying periods of when you're involved in sports and different things and all that. And then all of a sudden it's cut off all together, all at the same time. And it's like, wow. So we thought this would be a good first show to start with, and maybe add a little sports back into people's life and hopefully a little levity too.
Absolutely. I know, Murph, you work very hard to provide for your family. I work very hard, and sports at the end of my day are a great way for me to just, put the troubles of the day to aside, and to not have that is, I'm really like reevaluating things in my life, because sports is my life.
Yeah. So true. Yeah. So true.
So just a little bit about, continuing on with our background. So I have been a mathematics teacher for the past 6 years. I've coached for the past 14 years, believe it or not. Started right into high school. I've coached basketball, track and field, and I've attempted to coach volleyball. I understand the basics, the old bump set spike. And if any of my volleyball friends are watching this right now, they'd be shaking their head, because after that, I'm not quite sure what else there is. I've also been an athletic director at both the parochial and public levels for the past 9 years. And I'm a former volleyball and basketball official. Murph, you want to give the viewers just kind of a background on what you've done?
Yeah. As far as coaching, I actually, for the first time, well, I guess maybe not the first time, first official time, coached back in Boston many years ago when I was 26 years old and about 26, 25, and wanted to coach a 12-year-old baseball team, and thinking that there'll be some skill, there'd be, they're still kids, it was fun, that kind of thing. And I got quote unquote stuck with the 8, 9, and 10-year-olds, the beginners, and immediately found that I wasn't stuck at all, that it was, very instructional and a teaching environment, and a lot of fun. And it really made me, because I like to laugh, think a lot about how to communicate to kids and stuff like that. So I took it and embraced it, but never coached after that. Just I was only in Boston for 5 years, and life got in the way a little bit. And then I started raising my kids, and long story short is when they were in 5th grade, Sully approached me, and we had started chatting about coaching.
Do you remember where we were at?
I think it was in the gym, wasn't it?
Oh,
No.
come on.
Oh,
Come
we
on.
were at a swim meet.
Thank you.
Yes. Wow. Which we don't coach, but we cheer people on. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. So yeah, that's right. We were at a swim meet and we were just chatting about stuff. And I really didn't know Sully that much at all. And we just started chatting and we, talked about coaching, of course. And I said, yeah, I definitely want to get into it. And long story short is as soon as he heard that, and it's all he needs to hear from anybody. Oh, I'm thinking about cook. Done. You're coach.
Like a
So
shark that smells blood.
absolutely, absolutely. So I started coaching, and I said I want to coach basketball, and because that's the sport I feel like I know best other than baseball, and there's no baseball in grade school, and I started with volleyball, and maybe if we have maybe another time when we have stories or a time, we'll tell stories about that. Obviously, this isn't the topic for tonight, but just from the minute I started coaching my girls, I have twin girls who are now 18 in volleyball and in basketball and track. I fell in love with it. It's been great. So
Absolutely. So Murph has coached volleyball, basketball, and track. And I know his life wouldn't be the same without those. My life's not the same without sports. So that's why we're here today.
Yeah.
So Murph, talking on this topic of the coronavirus,
Yeah.
a couple weeks ago, you start hearing rumblings through the news. What was the moment for you where you realized, hey, this thing's legit? Like this thing is serious.
It's a good question. It's probably 3 or 4 weeks ago when the market started to, I think, overreact a bit to it. The stock market, that's being my business, and trying to coach actually clients to, take a breath and to, kind of relax about it first, but to do the right things. And again, that's off the topic, but I started to think about that. And I think the moment it really hit home was when I was watching the Blackhawks on TV and the NBA had the Utah Jazz game in which they canceled it. And it very quickly became a topic of conversation like, oh, I bet you the NHL follows, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of where it hit me. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I was sitting at home and I actually had the Thunder Jazz game on my television. And, well, for me, it was such a surreal moment because you see the medical trainer sprinting onto the floor to
Mhm.
tell the officials, you cannot start this game. I
Mhm.
mean, just how surreal that was. And for, I'm obviously haven't not saying you're old. We would never say you're old,
We're not going to
but
say that. No.
I'm only 27, and for me, surreal moments in sports, I can't recall many of them, but
Mhm.
we've already had two this year with the passing of Kobe Bryant, and then that night, it was a week ago today, March 11th. It seems like an eternity ago.
Yeah.
And for me, that's when it hit home where it's like, oh, this thing's legit. Like,
Yeah.
um, and then as you stated, the NHL followed, Major
Yep.
League Soccer followed. Eventually, spring training in baseball was canceled. Their season was pushed back.
Yeah.
And then there was the local effects at home. The Illinois High School Association canceled all their winter tournaments.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that in a moment. And then on our own personal level, at the grade school level, all of those sports have been shut down. And here we are making this podcast in a quarantine.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been only a few days actually. Think about that. It's the first Monday you had off. You thought about this, and we started talking, and there were a lot of ideas. And it's funny because this was right among the last topics that we actually came up with.
It
But
was.
as soon as we did, we were kind of like, this makes sense. This makes sense. It'll give a good feel for what we do, why we do it, the passion we bring to it, and then how that thing that you hold so precious is taken away. So yeah.
So Murph, we're going to start off by talking about the three different levels of sports right now and what we think that those groups are going into. So obviously this is a youth athletics podcast. We work primarily with 5th through 8th graders. And youth sports right now, is kind of in a transition. We were just finishing up fall sports. We were in kind of what they call the grace period, the week off, getting ready to get into spring sports. So the first thing I want to ask you is, you're a basketball coach, and not to toot your own horn, but you helped coach 3 teams to a championship. If this would have happened a week sooner, there would have been no championship games. What do you think would have been your mindset or your approach had that situation happened?
Wow. Great question. Well, I get, and actually the quick point to make is that only 3 years ago, the schedule was adjusted to make the season end a little bit earlier. And that took effect. So if it had not taken effect, then we would have not had a championship game. And that's obviously disappointing on every level. Frankly, the smallest part as a coach, it's, you see the kids being disappointed. But this was the first class that I coached since my girls. I brought them from 5th grade now to 8th grade. And we had talked a lot about, from the beginning of the year, the girls saying, this is my first practice of, all that stuff. And then, it getting closer and closer, and we had different events, during the year. And we always talked about that, this is our last rodeo, basically, in 4 years of getting to know these kids and watching them grow and all that kind of stuff. And then, the thing I think about when you ask that question is that, we were in the locker room before getting ready for the championship game, and one of the girls, for the last week has been very emotional, and a few of them have, but one in particular has been very emotional and talking about, just being sad that this is all ending, right? And she was crying in the locker room, and we were laughing about it, and it was a nice moment, it was a great moment actually, but we wouldn't have had that. And so to explain it to them, honestly, that's one question I haven't really thought about. But yeah, I don't know. I haven't really thought about that particular part about it. But I guess what I would say is, in thinking about it, if I was talking to one of the kids right now, I'd say, there are things bigger than sports. There are things that sports teach us. There are things that sports help us with. There are things that they, qualities that they bring out in us and hopefully help us better them. But it's kind of a microcosm for life. But the most important thing is, your life and how you lead it, how you react to things. And, initially I was actually like, they're making too much of this and all that. And now I'm very thankful that we kind of, at least here in the US, did what we did, and stopped things as quickly as I think possible. But yeah, I mean, I don't even really want to think about the fact that there wouldn't have been that 8th grade team, and such a great team to coach in so many ways, athletically and personally, and they're great kids. And so it just would have been tough. I mean, I as I was saying things to them about the things I just said, I'd be saying them to myself too, trying to reassure myself, because
Right.
after I finish those conversations, I go back to my bed and go, that kind of thing, as both of us would. So.
Absolutely. I mean, in coaching, a lot of time you spend more time after a practice or a game evaluating in your head if you said the right thing or you made the right decision. Stuff that sometimes keeps me up at night, as crazy as that sounds.
That's absolutely true. Especially with my daughters, it kept me up even more. But yeah, no, that's a great point. Is especially with kids, and the power as we're not. I'm even not that old that I can not remember, the effect that something that my mom or dad said to me or somebody who was a mentor said to me, and the power that it had. And somebody actually said to me something recent, or actually a few years ago, but you never know the power of something you say or do in somebody's life. And it can be just something as silly as, like, you see somebody in an elevator and you make a funny comment or something and they laugh, and maybe that's the first laugh they've had all day or something like that. That's kind of a way in which I think both of us approach sports, is try to make that day, make that practice, make that game, make the whole thing memorable, in some way and meaningful to them.
Now, on the flip side, Murph,
Mhm.
while thankfully you didn't have to give that talk about a season ending, I actually did have to give that talk. So I, at the parochial level, I'm an administrator, athletic director. At the public school level, I'm a coach, and I'm coaching 8th grade boys volleyball right now. And we were supposed to have our conference tournament this week. And, we have 7th and 8th boys and girls going at the same time. And, when we broke the news that the tournament was canceled, you could see that on their face. Just that, you don't want to use the word pain, but like, something that they thoroughly enjoy. It just, and now thankfully, being proactive, we set it up where the meeting we were having was going to be our end of season pizza party, and pizza always makes people feel better.
Pizza helps.
But for some of our 8th graders, they'll never play volleyball again.
Right.
And that kind of leads us into kind of where you and I were. We were supposed to start track practice on Monday. We had all these plans ready. New structure, coaching staff in place, all the equipment ready, and for our kids, I don't know. I don't know how they're feeling right now. I feel like if you would have started and then stopped, I mean, what do you think our kids are going through right now in terms of sports? Is it, just not even in their mind, or do you think, in the back of their mind, they're wondering if this is even going to happen this year?
Yeah, good question. I think initially they probably thought delay, kind of like anybody thought, and maybe April will start, or especially in their minds, it's like it's a long time in their minds, but it's also temporary. But it very quickly, I'm sure, sank in with them that, and I'm sure some kids right now are thinking that it's not going to happen, and I don't know, who knows, but I got to think the reality has absolutely settled in, because there's been a lot of time for all of us to think, about a lot of stuff. So I think it's tough. A couple of things that stood out to me just briefly is, I think that the good thing about coaching young kids is that they they can definitely dwell on things, but they tend to also forget things in a good way. Like, I remember coaching girls, my own girls and others, and we lost a game, and I was over there on the sideline like, oh man, we if we just did this, that kind of thing. And the girls are like, Mr. Murphy, ice cream, what's up? So that's good and that's healthy, but so I think about that, and they're resilient, right? But you see that picture of that kid sitting on the high school floor when he found out about his state championship being canceled, and these college kids. I root for Providence College, my alma mater, and the seniors. They had a strong end of the season. They in the last 6 games got them into the tournament, and now they're out. Everybody's out. So it's pretty devastating. And the pro athletes, I think they probably on some level take it the best, because after that void of the sports itself, they're older, obviously, and they all, unless they're on the tail end of their career, they're like, I get it, that kind of thing. So it's a mixed bag of reactions, obviously, but
I mean, that picture that you talked about, the senior from Hinsdale, just sitting, that actually made Sports Center with Scott Van Pelt. He's doing a nice little thing now where it's a tribute. Essentially every night he's doing a senior night, where he's recognizing high school and college athletes around the globe, or more so in this country, for it being their senior night. And I think at Timothy Christian, which is a local school near us, a local high school, hasn't made the IHSA state finals in 40 years in boys basketball, and they're down there on the bus on the floor in Peoria, and then they get that call. This is not going to happen. I mean, they were originally thinking about no spectators, and then it's just not going to happen. And I can only imagine just that heartbreak and anguish,
emptiness, right? That void.
Right. And, the IHSA, the Illinois High School Association, right now they are using they're not making a decision about spring sports. They're kind of sticking to their March 30th deadline, where on the flip side, the NCAA has already not only canceled winter sports, but they've canceled spring sports. Murph, what are your thoughts on the NCAA, taking that extra step and not just saying, hey, winter sports tournaments are canceled, but we're shutting down the spring sports season?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's probably the right thing to do. I think, maybe you talk about a suspension versus saying we're canceled, we're done. But, that's a minute detail in a sense. I mean, it's just, yeah, those kids have got to be just disappointed, it's just what it is. But it's, I think it's also, I'm a big believer that out of every bad experience, no, there really isn't a bad experience. Life is full of stuff that's tough and stuff that's easy and stuff that's rewarding and things that kind of punch you in the gut. This is one of those moments, and I think that most people take a look at that, and it gives them a little perspective, and perspective is good because one of the topics of our conversation down the road is about people taking sports too seriously, too far, where they're not, whether it's the kids, the fans, whoever, they're not even enjoying it to some extent. They're not enjoying that thrill of competition and all that kind of stuff. And they're just, it's blood sport at that point, that kind of thing. And, it leads to a lot of things that we'll talk about in future podcasts. But, the good that comes out of this is that people have to take a pause and they have to say, what's more important. My initial reaction to this was that people were overreacting. I was like, the NBA is doing this, and now they better not. The NHL's not going to do it. They're tougher than the NBA, that kind of stuff. And they did it the next day. And the with each passing hour or day that goes by, it's like it just makes sense. It just makes sense. So I guess that's maybe some consolation for some of these people. But when you're on the bus, that's tough.
I mean, I've got two quick personal stories to share. One is, Murph, my sister competes for a local high school basketball team that recently went downstate. And I asked my sister, I said, Sophie, if your state finals were this weekend or next weekend, it wouldn't have happened. Yeah. And, Sophie being, the, intellectual young lady that she is, she goes, well, that would have sucked.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just, she just gave me just her first gut reaction of like, she's like, I would have been in tears. I would have been devastated. I mean, for my family, the fact, and this will go into topics in later shows, but the fact of the matter is sports brings people together. In my family, I'm the oldest of 6 kids, with my parents and, with my grandmothers, trying to get us all together at once is not an easy thing, especially with work and other responsibilities that we have. But the fact that we were able to all come together to watch her compete in that semifinal in third place game, if we didn't have that moment, I personally would have been devastated.
Yeah. I mean, you think about and me being much older. There's so many moments that are unbelievable about sports, but there's very few that you remember just as your own experience. You remember who you experienced it with, whatever it is. So whether it's personally or you watching it, your favorite team or whatever it is. So it's highly personal, especially when you're in a situation like Sophie. You got the whole family out there and they're there for you, and that's just, I mean, to take that away from a kid is tough. It's tough.
And then the last story I want to share is actually not a story of my family, but I work with a lady at my public school, and her daughter is a Division III lacrosse player. And, she went to go watch her play last week. And, her daughter, she told me her daughter is in the best shape she's ever been. She could have actually graduated early But she kind of stretched out her schedule to maintain full-time status to, have her senior season for lacrosse. And, she went out and had what was her last match, her last game. And, just the emotion of that. And my colleague shared this poster that her daughter had that I really think hits all this home. And it says, "One day we will no longer be playing this game. One day we will hang up the medals, the trophies, and jerseys. We will no longer wake up early to practice or play this game. When we take our place to play one last time, but we will never know when that time will be. So play this game today. Work hard today, because you may not be playing tomorrow." And just that,
Yep.
I know it's very cliche, but it's absolutely true. You never know when it's going to be the last time you step on that field or step on that court or step on that track or step on that course. You just don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this year with the 8th graders, the girls, I knew a couple of girls were not going to be going on and playing in high school, and they were doing other things. And, that was, I don't know, maybe it was tougher on me than it was on them, but it was tough. It's like, for me, when I finished playing basketball in any kind of league, I joined intramurals in college, and I played pickup basketball until I was afraid my old Achilles would go. But I get to work that out through coaching, and that's fun. But it's great, actually. But it's what was I gotta say? I lost my train of thought. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I know for us getting ready to coach track, track is actually one of my favorite sports because there's something for everyone. If you love to run far distances, there's something for you. If you like to run short sprints, there's something for you. If you like to jump, there's multiple options. And if you're like, hey, I don't like running or jumping, I'm going to be a thrower. That's right. Throwers, baby. And, for a lot of our kids, with the fact that there's so many spring sports that go on during the high school season, right? There's baseball, there's softball, there's lacrosse, there's rugby, there's girls soccer. And then the fact that a lot of these sports are turning into year-long sports like basketball and volleyball on the club scene. Like, I don't know if I don't know when it will hit our 8th graders, but I think at some point, if the season does not happen, how are they supposed to know last spring as a 7th grader, hey, this is going to be my last track meet?
Yeah. I don't even want to think about that. But yeah, no, I mean, it's just devastating. And speaking for, I think I can speak well for the girls that I coach now, or it might be coached, unfortunately, but they love to compete. They work hard, and they love to compete, and having that taken away is tough. I mean, many of them will go on and compete in some other way, but this every bit of time or every level of play is different. And the one thing that I've always loved about the coaching at the grade school level is that there's no cut, and everybody plays, and everybody's got to be made to feel like they're part of the team, and made to, in our minds as coaches, to figure out ways that they can contribute to a team, because they're kids that are there for, because they love the sport, with every fiber of their being. There's kids that their parents sign them up, and they're like, I don't know, or to be social or whatever. And you got to coach each level of that, but try to get, something that makes a rewarding experience for them, makes it a team thing, and then we're all working together and all that kind of stuff. And so, in high school and other stuff, it gets, again, another topic for another podcast, but it's different level. You can get cut, you can be benched if you're not working hard enough, or good enough, or tall enough, or whatever, even those kinds of reasons, of course. But grade school is just, that innocence of it is really cool.
And I know I've mentioned it before in coaches meetings, and I'm sure it's going to come up many times through this podcast, but middle school sports is truly the last time that a kid can enjoy a sport just for the what the sport provides. Because once you get past 8th grade, the more that you're in something, the more it's going to feel like a job. So, you know, that's why you and I do what we do. We want to provide those experiences so that way, whether a kid continues on in high school, continues on in college, or they do one or the other or neither, we want them to be able to look past, on these past 4 years and say, I had a great experience. I learned a lot. I had coaches that cared for me. I had teammates that were supportive, and really look back on it as a positive memory.
Yeah. Yep. It's true.
So, as we transition, we're going to be wrapping things up here shortly. Murph, what do you think it's going to take for the sports world? If obviously you're not a medical expert, maybe you are. You're a doctor of stocks and financials,
right?
But in your personal opinion, what is your gut telling you, and when we're going to get back to sports normal?
I don't know. There's so many factors that control that. One is, if, like I said before, if we did the things that I think we mostly did right in this country, as far as trying to stem this, and nip it in the bud, there's that part that's going to be where all of a sudden we have all these kits and tests and things, and people get tested. And of course, if you're testing everybody, it's going to be lots and lots of people, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, which is still a small portion of the country, but it affects a lot of people. And then, kind of the fear and anxiety that people have, whether it's, the obvious, the health, and whether it's the economy or people having jobs and all that stuff. So it's, I think at this point, everybody's going to be super cautious, and the perspective is there and all that stuff. So, I hope we get 2 or 3 meets in there, the championship and and the others, in there, so the kids can at least get on the field. Because like you said, track is such a great sport in so many ways that it's got so many events. It's got an event for everybody. So to not have that, whether it's 8th grade or 5th grade or whatever, but 8th grade, that's, like I said, I'm thinking most about that right now because that's where it is for me. But yeah, it's tough to say, but I think we're going to play cautious, and we'll see how it goes.
Right. I think in this situation, if you're not being cautious, then you're being irresponsible. And especially when we're talking about, the safety and well-being of our student athletes and coaches, that's always at the forefront of every decision that we make and ever will make as long as we're doing this. I know from an administrator perspective, both as the president of the parochial track conference and as an athletic director, I know high schools have already said, you know what, we're regardless of what happens here, we're not going to have any outside rentals for the remainder of the school year. And for us, it's not like basketball or volleyball where you can find one of our own gyms, or it's cross country where you're on an outdoor course. Track, you need to be reliant on rentals and being able to utilize spaces. And for me, that's my number one concern, is not that the fact that the CDC will come out, obviously we'll follow their guidelines, whatever Governor Pritzker says, we'll follow his guidelines. But, if they come back in May and say, hey, we're good to go, which I don't know, I'm not a medical expert either. But I don't know if we're going to have anywhere to run. And that's kind of leaving me, that's what keeps me up at night is how do you work past that?
That's why I'm a coach, not an athletic director. But it's tough. And then you got the other aspect too, is that there might be some parents that say, I don't want my kids to compete, or, whatever, so,
and what makes our conference a track conference, for those of us that know our conference, they know how the conference works. For those that don't, our conference is based off of volunteers. The schools provide 9 to 11 volunteers to run the events, because if we were to hire multiple officials for every event, we're talking, at least $5,000 a meet. And we just don't have that. And, I know some of these sports are talking about, like basketball. Yeah, you could, in theory, drop kids off and play with no spectators. But in track and field, if we don't have those bodies to help in volunteer, mean, we don't have a meet. So
Right.
there's a lot of variables,
Yeah.
a lot of unanswered questions. I know I'm already thinking, I always try to be a step ahead, no matter what the situation is. And, I know some people have thrown out June, some have thrown out July, but, if for some reason we get into a situation where there is no track season, I at least want to have one meet for those 8th graders. No one else, because, when you put on that uniform and you represent your school, it'd be nice for those kids, not just from our schools, but from these other schools, to have that one last chance to truly know, hey, this is the last time I'm representing my school.
It's a great idea.
That's obviously me planning ahead. I have all this free time. Not
I just
really.
react.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, a couple more things before we sign off on our first podcast here, episode 1 of Murph and Sully's Youth Athletics podcast. Murph, how has your everyday world changed due to this coronavirus, this COVID-19? Have you seen any differences?
Oh yeah. I mean, I work from home. So in a sense that hasn't changed, in many ways. I haven't actually had any clients that said they, or people I'm going to meet with say, I don't want to meet because of this. There is one client in particular that I'm thinking about that's in their a couple, they're in their 60s and they want to get together. And I actually put it off till next week just to make sure kind of, that would be okay. So as far as that's concerned, it's weird because it feels like everybody else isn't working, but because I've had to coach clients with the market being down and all sorts of things like that, I've been really busy. But I love what I do, so I'm passionate about that. I consider it coaching as well, so that's really cool. I get to get that coaching gene exercised on both sides of it. It hasn't really changed that much in that sense, but it's been actually, I was thinking about today, it's kind of been mentally taxing and exhausting because I'm really, I care about my clients and I want to make sure that they're okay and they're doing well and things like that. So that hasn't changed that much other than just kind of ramping up the, frankly, just the empathy, and trying to work with clients and coach them through it. But my kids are home, as everybody's kids are. I don't know, they're not yet going crazy, but they're driving me a little crazy.
And the dogs.
And the dogs. The dogs don't seem to be aware of what's going on. They just think more people are around. And my son's home from college and all that kind of stuff. And they're really just not getting a whole lot of work. So, the longer this goes on, the harder it gets. But I think also to some extent, people will settle in and do that. So, do their thing and figure out a way, through. But, I look at it as, although the first few days were frankly a little bit tense in the Murphy house here.
You were wrong on everything, right?
I'm always wrong on everything. It's just maybe they amped it up a little. But yeah, so I mean, hopefully it's a down. We look at this down the road, and hopefully everything goes as well as it possibly can, and all that stuff. But we look back at it as it's one of those things we lived through together. So that makes for I won't call it memories, but it's experiences and things like that, and hopefully we grow from that. So let's get back to it as soon as we can, but safely, obviously.
As we work through the software, I updated the ticker at the bottom to say Murph is always wrong. Just want to make sure
which
that
goes
our
for
viewers,
this podcast as well as my life. Married with kids, that's how it goes, man.
There we go. There's your Murph life lesson. And this one-on-one moment by Murph is brought to you by Dan Murphy of Stepwise Financial, the official business sponsor of Murph and Sully's Youth Athletics podcast.
Thinking on one side that you're right and you've got so much wisdom to share, and knowing on the other side that no one cares and thinks you're dumb.
Ain't that something?
It's fun.
Always. I know from my perspective as a teacher, we are now in full-on e-learning. Students are reporting, completing assignments via this thing called the Google Classroom.
Mhm.
I know even though my basketball season's over, I actually have a Google Classroom for my team where we post videos, and
Mhm.
I actually assigned them an e-learning assignment today.
Mhm.
I said your assignment today is to watch Game 5 of the 1991 NBA Finals, the start of the Bulls dynasty, and you need to compare and contrast today's game, how it's played, and the game back in the 90s. I thought it was a good way to kind of break things up a little bit.
Nice. Very good.
Yep.
Very
So,
good.
so last but not least,
Mhm.
before we talk about what we're doing next week, I would say, and I think we talked about this, and now we're sharing it with our listeners. If this coronavirus, obviously, it's this, severity of it, making sure we're keeping ourselves safe and those around us, our loved ones, our family, our friends, our communities safe. Um, this has really led me to appreciate what we have in sports.
Mhm.
Like, I do this, every day except for Sunday, and we won't get into that. But, for me, not having it every day,
Yeah.
it just makes me appreciate it more. And
Yeah.
certain things that maybe I would take super serious or would really like eat me up inside.
Mhm.
Um, when we actually get back to sports, I don't think that's going to affect me as much because I'm really going to appreciate it even more.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we tend to move on some level, but yeah, there'll always be that thought, and even for the young kids, they're gonna know about this time. They're gonna remember it, and hopefully, it gives them a little perspective. It gives, as a coach, a teaching moment to say, hey, you were here when this happened, and you were deprived of doing this. That's why you got to give your all. And that's, like you said, it's cliche, but the reason it's cliche is because it's true. You know.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Murph, we have made it through our first episode, right? I know it's very exciting stuff. For
Uh-huh.
those of you out there, if we'd appreciate you passing this on to other people that either know us or people that you think would enjoy listening to this content. I know today was kind of more of looking at this COVID-19 from an entire sports perspective, but next week is where we really start dialing in on youth sports. In particular, Murph, you and I are going to talk about our experiences as a 5th through 8th grade athlete.
Wow.
Yep.
It should be interesting. Going back in the memory banks
And
there.
we may even dabble into some high school. This week's show was more serious, and next week I think is going to be a great opportunity for some funny stories or funny
Hmm.
moments of coaches.
Yeah.
We're going to discuss things that coaches did that were good, that we thought were good, and things that we had coaches that did that we thought were bad. And all those experiences, the good, bad, and the in between, shaped who we are
Hmm.
as coaches.
Yeah.
So, really
Yeah.
looking forward. Not sure when our next episode's going to be. Obviously, we got some free time in the evenings on our hands, but we look forward now to promoting, pushing out more content for you. And if you're a business sponsor and you'd like to support Murph and Sully's Youth Athletics Podcast, send me an email or shoot me a text, and we would love to have you be part of this brand. So, Murph, do you have anything for the audience before we cut it off?
Uh, just be smart, be cautious and healthy, and realize that, like coaching, like playing on a team, your actions affect others, and you think maybe visiting grandma or grandpa, or that kind of stuff. You got to be careful about that kind of stuff, and just give us have a perspective on the human side of this thing, and let's hopefully get back to it as soon as we can, but appreciate in a good way when something's taken away from you, that that you benefited by doing it, and what doesn't kill us makes us stronger, so you gotta just keep working, and that's life as well as sports.
Absolutely. And wash your hands, people. 20 seconds.
20 seconds is a long time. It's true.
Murph, I know when you wash your hands, you go and sing "Careless Whisper" by George Michael as you're washing
He
your
had to
hands.
work that in. He had to work that in. All you
Hey,
kids I coach know that that's not true.
well, I'm glad we were able to sneak it in. We're going to try not to do it all the time.
I'm never going to dance again, Sully.
Well played. Make sure you wake me up before you go, Murph.
Oh, boy.
For
and on
Murph,
that note.
Yeah, for Murph, I'm Sully. Thank you for listening to our Youth Athletics podcast. We'll see you next time.